Studying Twelfth Night and keen to make additional progress, in particular on Act 4, Scenes 1 and 2, you're in the right place. Stay tuned. Schofield on Shakespeare.
Abbiamo il cuore a strisce, portaci dove vuoi.
A familiar bleat, please, that you need to have read Act 4, Scenes 1 and 2 in some detail and thought about it before watching this video. If you haven't, go and do that now. Time for my brief summary first of Act 4, Scene 1. In the previous scene, we have seen Viola mistaken for Sebastian. Now it's time for the reverse. Feste sees Sebastian and assumes that he is Cesario. Feste is exasperated when Sebastian claims that he doesn't know him, although unwittingly provides some insight into the current state of play in Olivia when he declares, presumably sarcastically, that nothing that is so is so. However, when Sir Andrew enters and strikes him, thinking that he is Cesario, Sebastian's response is both furious and violent. He first beats Sir Andrew and then takes on Sir Toby. The fighting is stopped by the dramatic arrival of Olivia, who rebukes Sir Toby and lovingly defends a bewildered Sebastian. The scene ends with Sebastian understandably feeling like he is dreaming. Nonetheless, he's willing to follow the beautiful and beguiling stranger that is Olivia. How about Act 4, Scene 2? Well, this is the famous scene in which Feste disguises himself as Setopus the priest, superficially to question Malvolio, who has been imprisoned within a dark room by Sir Toby and co. I say superficially question because the clear intent of all is to torment. Malvolio vigorously defends his sanity to Setopus, who responds with contradictory nonsense. Out of Malvolio's hearing, Sir Toby unexpectedly reveals that he wants to bring an end to his trickery. At some point off stage, Olivia has clearly made clear her displeasure at his antics. Feste returns to address Malvolio, but as himself. Malvolio asks him to bring writing equipment so that he can send a message to Olivia. Feste apparently agrees and ends the scene with a song which references a medieval character who was said to consort with the devil. Time for you to answer some questions. I will give my ideas in due course, but do get ready to press pause now to write some detailed responses on the questions on screen. This video will resume in 5 seconds time, so press pause now to write those responses. Question 1. Explore the different responses to the belief that Sebastian is Cesario in Act 4, Scene 1. How do we as the audience respond to these repeated examples of mistaken identity? The first example of mistaken identity in the scene is Feste thinking that Sebastian is Cesario, leaving the latter perplexed and irritated. Unsurprisingly, Feste is astonished by Sebastian's proclamation that he isn't Cesario and that he isn't the person whom Lady Olivia has sent for. He even grudgingly praises the insistence with which Sebastian continues to deny what Feste sees as his identity. In spite of Feste's pressure, and we clearly join the exchange halfway through, Sebastian continues to hold out, to persist in his stubborn, inexplicable rebuttals. It is important and useful to contrast this scene with its counterpart in Act 3, Scene 4, in which Viola is taken for Sebastian. In this scene, yes, Viola is left confused by Antonio's mystifying words, but she soon realises that his insistence that she has his purse must mean that her brother Sebastian is alive. Thus any frustration is quickly forgotten to be replaced by joy and hope. Prove true, imagination, oh prove true, that I, dear brother, be now tame for you. But of course this can't happen here because Viola is operating under a pseudonym, Cesario, which Sebastian has never heard of. At this stage, all Sebastian knows is that some stranger is claiming that they have met before, and that he knows some random woman. So the result of this is pure bewilderment, and the quite natural question later on as to whether all the people are mad. The audience can laugh at Sebastian's bewilderment, knowing full well that it will be short-lived and cleared up sooner rather than later with Viola's arrival on stage, just as Viola has already sensed the real reason for the apparently bizarre request for her to return a purse: her brother is alive. Nonetheless, Feste's comic use of consecutive negative constructions within the lines on screen do unwittingly highlight the dangers of trusting appearances within the complex world of Illyria, a world in which very little is as it seems. When Feste presumably gesticulates towards his nose and says that this isn't his nose, we laugh at his attempt to demonstrate the nonsensicalness of denying something which is completely obvious and must be true. However, it is very much the case that in Illyria very little is quite as it seems, and yes, sometimes even noses are not noses. As well as Sebastian not being Cesario, who himself is not Cesario but Viola, we have Olivia not being in love with Malvolio, in spite of her apparent written professions. There's also Sir Andrew's illusions in terms of his relationship with Sir Toby, and the misinformation about each other's fighting prowess from both Sir Andrew and Viola. Feste's job as a fool is to provide deliberate insight into people and situations through clever, probing use of language. It is ironic that arguably his sharpest insight here comes not from his own linguistic contortions, but from a very short, simple declaration based on a misunderstanding, which is uttered with scornful sarcasm. It is also noticeable that he takes exception to Sebastian's phrasing when the latter asks him to release his foolishness, vent thy folly elsewhere. He repeats this phrase twice before using the verb vent himself, clearly with mocking intent. Perhaps Feste feels he should always be the person to take the lead when it comes to elaborate use of language for effect. Sir Andrew, Sir Toby and presumably Fabian are the next to mistake Sebastian for Cesario. Fueled by Sir Toby's suggestion in Act 3 Scene 4 that Cesario was more a coward than a hare, Sir Andrew immediately proposed that he would follow and beat him, and here in Act 4 Scene 1 he is as good as his word. Perhaps concerns about his own perceived lack of masculinity have made him determined to do at least one thing which appears manly and brave. However, the problem, of course, is that he's not facing the effeminate Cesario, but a real man in Sebastian, who seems most willing to fight if tried beyond endurance. And the difference between strikes and beats in the stage directions makes it clear that Sebastian's response is more sustained and painful than Sir Andrew's initial "get one in quick before getting out of here" blow. What I find interesting here, and perhaps reassuring, is Sir Toby's response. In previous videos, I have lambasted him for being an unpleasant, ruthless bully. But here, he unquestionably sticks up for his friends. He tells Sebastian to stop his beating, to hold. Does anyone else hear echoes of Lady Macbeth envisaging heaven peeping through the night in order that she should stop her evil machinations? While Sir Toby's threat to throw his dagger over the roof of close by Olivia's house implies that he is deadly serious and is prepared to act as well as give commands to cease. This is confirmed when, infuriated beyond belief, he subsequently challenges the young man to draw his sword, to put up his iron. The question I want to ask is a seemingly obvious one. Why does he bother? Indeed, those of us who have read to the end of the play will know that he very much comes off the worse during his bouts with Cesario. And in his last appearance, he is bloodied, grumpy and cursing. Even at this stage, we know that he can't be that bothered about Sir Andrew as a person. Lines such as, "I've been dear to him, lad, some 2,000 strong or so," and "For Andrew, if he were opened, and you find so much blood in his liver as will clog the foot of a flea, I'll eat the rest of the anatomy," have made that pretty clear to the audience, if not yet to his unwitting victim. So if Sir Toby isn't motivated by the honourable desire to protect his friends, could he be motivated by consciousness between the difference of his own position and that of Cesario's? Just as in Act 2, Scene 5, he is outraged when he overhears the household steward Malvolio daydreaming about being Count Malvolio. So here he thinks that someone he associates with is being challenged by a mere page, hence his use of the adjective malapert, meaning saucy or impudent. Furthermore, though he doesn't comment directly on it, he will be aware that his niece Olivia has become extraordinarily fond of this page, and, for all he knows, may even be contemplating a highly inappropriate marriage. Such a marriage would contravene Elizabethan expectations about generally marrying within your class. And, ironically, confirm his own throwaway remark in Act 1, Scene 3 that Olivia wouldn't match above her degree. So perhaps Sir Toby feels compelled to fight, not really because of any particular desire to protect Sir Andrew, but due to his own ideological beliefs. How dare this young lower-class upstart not only bewitch my niece, but start throwing his sword around? Furthermore, I wonder whether he may see a genuine threat to his own comfortable position within the household. If Olivia marries, the power would transfer to the new husband, who might prefer not to have an idle, drunken, good-for-little uncle on the premises. So the effect of Sebastian being mistaken for Cesario in this middle section of Act 4, Scene 1 is arguably to confirm the audience's impressions of Sir Toby and Sir Andrew. The former has a protectionist attitude towards his own position. The latter is a pathetic coward, hence his typically lily-livered and slightly illogical suggestion that he will drag Cesario to court for assault, even though he started the whole miserable affair. For the audience, it provides easy-to-enjoy visual humour, which is particularly important for the modern audience who can struggle to understand much of Feste's humour. Hence Emma Rice's decision to cut most of his original lines in her 2017 production at the Globe. Now on to Olivia. How is she affected by her erroneous belief that Sebastian is Cesario? And what is the effect of this? Well, before answering that question, I'd like to ask the inverse. How is Sebastian affected by being repeatedly taken for Cesario in this scene? Well, he is astonished at what he sees as Feste's mystifying words. He is bewildered and driven to ferocious response by Sir Andrew and Sir Toby's taunts and sabre rattling. By the time Olivia enters, therefore, there is an argument that he has already exhausted his supply of "thou knows not me," "depart from me," and "are all these people mad" comments. With so many people seeming to know him and allocating him a certain role and persona, by the end of this scene, Sebastian has to switch from bewildered defiance to a degree of passive acceptance. If Olivia had been the first person to enter, Sebastian would surely have wanted to interrogate her further. Who are you? What are you going on about? But with her being the last, Sebastian's desire to fight about these perplexities has drained. His focus has shifted from asking whether other people are mad to whether he is mad or dreaming. And this of course affects Olivia's behaviour. Used to Cesario's repeated knockbacks, she's clearly anticipating rejection, hence the attempting to be forceful, "Thou shalt not choose but go," and the short imperative, "Do not deny." However, Sebastian, unsurprisingly, finds passivity at Olivia's hands a far more attractive proposition than verbal jousting with Feste or actual jousting with Sir Toby and Sir Andrew. Thus, we see Olivia's hopes rising for the first time. Hence her joyful cry at the end of the scene. Could her humiliating rejections finally be at an end? For the audience, this is highly amusing, both to see Sebastian's rapid complaisance at the hands of a beautiful woman, but also, as we know through dramatic irony, that she has the wrong person. In the 1970 production directed by John Sichel, Sebastian is so taken with Olivia that he, or she, gets down on one knee and kisses her hands. Olivia simply cannot believe her luck.
Nay, come, my prithee, would thou'st be ruled by me?
Madam, I will.
Oh, say so, and so be.
Time for question 2. Scrutinise the treatment of Malvolio in Act 4, Scene 2 and his response. Research how this has been shown in past productions. To what extent do you feel comfortable watching this on stage? This can and does vary between productions. Let's whiz through different interpretations so that we have a visual idea of how Malvolio's imprisonment has been shown on stage and how comfortable we feel about this. First, 1970 John Sichel, in which, remember, Malvolio is played by acting legend Sir Alec Guinness.
Peace in this prison.
They've counterfeits well a good maid.
Who calls there?
Sir Topas the curate, who comes to visit Malvolio the lunatic.
Sir Topas, good Sir Topas, go to my lady.
Out, hyperbolical fiend!
It is clear that this Malvolio has been left in darkness within his beneath the stairs bare prison. Hence his frantic blinking after the fool has swung open the outer shutters. In Armfield's 1986 production, Malvolio seems to be in some kind of sewer or horrible cramped tunnel.
What out? Peace in this prison.
Who calls there?
Sir Toby and Maria. Come to visit Malvolio the lunatic.
Whilst in Trevor Nunn's star-studded 1996 production, Malvolio appears to be in darkness within some kind of stables. Humiliating. So even before we look at the language used, audiences are likely to feel very uncomfortable with Malvolio's physical confinement, particularly perhaps the fact he is kept in darkness. With the still image on screen, we can just see a nose pressed desperately between the gaps in the stable door, which of course can only be opened from the outside. Do we feel he deserves this? I'll come back to that question, but let's now scrutinise some of the language used. An early sign of Feste's deliberately confusing language is seen when he claims that he treats the devil, including those who are said to have their souls currently taken over by the devil, with courtesy. Yes, he doesn't resort to any physical cruelty, which I guess he could potentially have done, but his continued swearing, use of exclamations, and repeated faux exorcist exhortations can hardly be described as courteous treatments. Something Hilaire Callendorf takes up within exorcism and its texts, subjectivity in early modern literature of England. Any idea that Malvolio is treated with polite respect is clearly nonsense, and I wonder whether there is something even more disturbing about cruel treatment when it comes under the umbrella of professed kindness. In his next utterance, Feste goes one step further in his quest to unsettle and disorientate Malvolio. as he uses his ability to emit plausible sounding nonsense to devastating effect. Barricados, or barricades, are generally large objects put together in order to stop people travelling along a certain route or an enemy advancing. They are emphatically not transparent or see-through, or indeed bear any resemblance to windows. Meanwhile, the suggestion that the clerestories, another type of window, are as shiny as a very dark wood or the colour black is clearly nonsensical, as is the supposed precise direction of the south-north. This is head-screwing obfuscation. There is no desire to communicate, solely torment. Following further extravagant references to darkness, including a shift to a metaphorical meaning, i.e. ignorance, Feste returns to the quick-fire question format he used to ensnare Olivia back in the more light-hearted times of Act 1, Scene 5. Pythagoras, an ancient Greek philosopher, may be most famously known for his splendidly easy maths equation known as Pythagoras' theorem, but he also believed in the transmigration of the soul after death into a new body of either the same or a different species. Malvolio knows this, thus gives the correct answer to Feste's opening question. Under this theory, a grandmother's soul could potentially move to the body of a bird's upon her death. Unsurprisingly, not just as a Puritan, but a reasonably rational human being, Malvolio thinks this is ridiculous, hence his response indicating his proud respect for the sanctity of the human soul, and confirmation that he himself is emphatically not a Pythagorean. Feste's response is both reasonably funny and cruel. It is, of course, reasonable and sane to want to look after and protect our grandparents. However, Feste's implicit argument that Malvolio must be mad because he might theoretically be prepared to kill the soul of his grandmother transmigrated to a bird is clearly ludicrous. Even more, if we accept Mariah's initial premise that Malvolio is a kind of Puritan, I wonder whether this suggested forced belief change is as offensive as Shylock's forced conversion to Christianity in The Merchant of Venice. Puritans fostered a more intense Christian experience and clearly believed that their souls would head to heaven rather than to a nearby chicken. Now Malvolio, quite rightly, doesn't seem to take much notice of Feste's Pythagorean nonsense, partly as it comes hot on the heels of other nonsense about darkness not related to religious belief. However, what we see here is the disturbing ruthlessness on the part of Feste acting as Mariah and Sir Toby's agent to unsettle. Absolutely no topic is out of bounds.
In this question, I asked you to scrutinise the treatment of Malvolio in Act 4, Scene 2 and his response. Let's look at the latter more closely. Yes, we would imagine all of us suffering terribly bound within a prison and faced with a bombardment of baffling, contradictory knowledge from a priest. Does he?
Well, his language certainly indicates distress. The thrice-repeated cry of fool shows intense frustration, whilst the adverb notoriously suggests that his treatment is so shameful that it could be catalogued and go down in history. However, I don't see any signs of Malvolio genuinely losing his mind, and I wonder whether that should inform our response. Are we perhaps missing the point by feeling a great deal of sympathy for Malvolio in this scene, as we put ourselves in his position and envisage ourselves becoming unhinged? In his claim that he alone has experienced more abuse than anyone else, should our minds return to Olivia's suggestion that he may be sick of self-love? Within these words, should we recognise the sign of a man who loves himself too much and scorns others too much, and therefore there is no real chance of him experiencing any significant repercussions from the events of the scene, other than perhaps positive ones? He may finally attain some humility. Should we, put simply, relax and enjoy this scene and not feel guilty for doing so? Malvolio needs to be brought down several pegs, and he'll be fine. Catherine Davies, in her 2004 novel The Madness of Love, based on Twelfth Night, clearly feels otherwise. In her version, Malvolio is a maths teacher, Mr. Bose. Yes, he is priggish, full of himself, masturbates once about the head teacher, Melody Vi, within the classroom, and is spotted doing so by a pupil. And he's a bully to more vulnerable children in his school. But he's also a human being, a lapsed alcoholic, someone who is incredibly lonely in spite of the front he presents to pupils at his school. When he is tricked into dressing as a clown for a party within the village, it is the most appalling humiliation. Here's an extract, though, which gives an insight into the minutiae of his daily existence. Sometimes he just watches the television with the sound turned off, lip reading, listening to the weather outside, thinking up phrases he would like to say to her, setting himself impossible problems like the sum of his desire divided by the extent of her beauty. Impossible equations. Setting out the geometry of his feelings, the sharp angles of his pain against the statistical evidence that she wouldn't go near him even if he were the last man on earth. If he could have written poetry, then he would have done, but all that is out of his welkin. Sometimes he vomits, always neatly in the lavatory, and he always cleans the bowl afterwards with the pine disinfectant he keeps behind the pipe, or in the morning if he's too drunk to get the child-proof lid off the bottle. Although he sometimes falls and bangs his head, he prides himself on his control. He does not drink in the mornings. He swills out his mouth with Listerine. At school he speaks from the corner of his mouth, or turns away and keeps his distance. There have only been a few moments when he has lost the focus of what he was saying, when the world has seemed whirligig. Sometimes he has felt that the children had the power to outwit him, and he has panicked and forgotten the answer, but he has always turned the tables on them. He is finding it harder to maintain discipline. There are waves of talking that he cannot stop. He has resorted to desperate measures. He has made large boys stand on school chairs. He has thrown things, slammed the door and raised his voice. At least there is no Fitch, and, as far as he can tell, he has not told the others. Fitch was the pupil who was hidden in a corner of the classroom during his notorious after-school masturbation session. Even if we recognise that Mr. Bose is not a particularly attractive character, we are drawn to empathising with him. With the narrative focused on him at key points during the novel, we can see him mentally disintegrating in a heartbreaking way. We have to care, and indeed one of the pupils involved in the plot against him, Fitch, probably based on Sir Toby, actually knocks on his door to check he is okay after his horribly embarrassing appearance as a clown at the party. He isn't. And returning to Twelfth Night, perhaps we are not meant to care so much about Malvolio. Is he simply a caricature or a cartoon character, as one of my own students very recently suggested? Should we stop feeling awkward when we see him bound up on a stage and simply get on with enjoying the play?
Dear viewers and subscribers, this has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, imploring you to think more closely about Act 4, Scenes 1 and 2 of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Many thanks for watching.